jump in and interrupt. Hi, Tracy. I hope you're there. And so, brilliant. Let's crack on. So, maybe we could just start by picking up on kind of what we did last week. So, it would be useful if, sorry, I probably should have put this in the email rather than just throwing it on the spot, but it would be interesting if you could just come back and maybe reflect a bit on what happened after last week, and if you've had a chance to think about some of the things that we talked about. So if I remind you with, let me just put this up. So this is the value proposition canvas that we talked about last week. And it'd just be interesting to hear about, I guess, if you've had a chance to think about it any more, if you've been able to do any more work on it, and if you have, what you think. So maybe I could just go around the room, and if I could start with Cecile, if that's okay. If that's not putting you on the spot too quickly.
Well, I'm also said I'm a bit unprepared. Essentially, this last week I've looked a little bit more into the customer, and I think that's been quite fascinating. I did get a little bit sidetracked in the whole marketing, how to get, you know, funnels in the marketing to get to understand who my customer is and what their pain points are. It also made me reflect on my product and thinking that what I want a little bit more is a little bit more community in there, so that they feel that they are belonging to something and they can see themselves going from one place to another place, and that getting to the other place is going to, you know, get them to be feeling more improving their status, or, you know, that there's some kind of improvement in their you know, from where they're standing now. Their pain points have been basically met with springboard onto the future. So essentially, you know, this is taking them from where they are now into some beautiful, optimistic future prospects in this crazy world in which we're living in. So I've been looking at that and thinking about how can I incorporate that, thinking a little bit more maybe like a virtual book clubs or some kind of engagement that the people bring in. So I was looking into book clubs, and one of my friends is a fundi, so that was quite good. So I gleaned some information from her about the book clubs, and thinking that may be quite a good way to do it, but I still need to work out how you would do it in different age groups or something. But I'm working on creating more of a community so people then feel that they can belong to this. And then I also went a little bit off tangent into some kind of future things, thinking we could do other country story times and, you know, sort of expand into some kind of wonderful thing. And then I had a real big fright yesterday when I was looking at my emails, because there was something from my utility company, and there was Joanna Lumley, and she was sitting on this lovely thing and said, you know, I love, you know, growing up, and I love all these stories, and that was it. And she had an old book there, and she says, I'm bringing something completely new, and my heart just sank down into the pit of my stomach. And then she says, yeah, you can have a competition if you do a meter reading. I was like, thank goodness for that. So yeah, that's where I am. So more focusing on my potential customers and how to get to them.
Fantastic. Okay, that's a great summary. Thank you very much. Interesting. I mean, the whole idea around community is interesting. And you know, with Joanna Lumley, you also think the role of influencers could also be very interesting in terms of how you kind of get that out there. But that's great. And I think we're certainly going to interrogate that a little bit more in terms of some of those assumptions that we look at, and those pain points, and kind of we'll dive into that in a slightly different angle in more detail today. Okay, so John Jenkins, can I move on to you and ask you about where you're at? So I'm going to give everyone 2 minutes so we can crack on.
Okay. So because I've missed the initial session, I spent quite a bit last week actually going back and doing the lean canvas model. I have made a start on the value proposition, but if I'm being honest, it's one of the things that I really struggle with. So last week's session was quite good in terms of actually looking at it from the gains and pains and customer job side first, rather than coming up with a product and then trying to find things that match it. Some of the things that we've done this week, we've actually signed up to a group called the Early Adopters Hub, which will put me in touch with 15 accountants that are early adopters of technology and software. So we'll be working with them throughout November and December to get a really good kind of understanding of where our product sits at the moment and what their priorities are and the direction we should be taking the product in. I've also reached out to a couple of accountants that I know who've already had a look at the product to kind of ask them what they see the problems that we're solving are, and what their gains and pains are, so that I can actually take it from a more kind of practical approach, just because I'm struggling myself to articulate what I perceive those, you know, gains and pains to be. So I'm cheating, I guess, in a way, because I'm actually getting the answers from, you know, from potential customers. But for me, it just seems like a logical and practical step to follow.
I would say absolutely that is not cheating. That is
It feels like it.
Absolute base requirement of building something that people actually want, and asking them and discovering what they want is probably the most essential thing that you can do, more or less.
Okay, I feel better then.
Yeah. So in fact, we're going to come on to this. I'm going to give you an example a bit later on of an interview from Joe Gebbia, who is one of the co-founders of Airbnb, who's talking specifically on that point. Mainly because it just breaks the whole thing up and you won't have to listen the whole time. But it's kind of quite a nice, interesting story given what Airbnb has become. Thank you, John. That's great. And if you want to, if any of you, by the way, want to have a chat sort of outside of this in specifics, and if you want to talk a little bit about the pains and gains and the value proposition canvas, I'm very happy to find a time for a chat some other time during the week. Mariella, could I turn to you now, please?
Yes. So, John, I want to ask you, how do you approach these potential customers? By email, you call them, you create a group in WhatsApp? How was your...
Because I'm working in the industry, obviously the app that we're building is in an industry that I've worked in for 20 years. So I've already got, you know, tens, hundreds of contacts that I've met through work and through going to conferences over the years. So fortunately, I kind of just reach out to people that I know through LinkedIn, and then engage in conversation with them through that. But the thing that I mentioned called the Early Adopters Hub is that somebody's actually taken this idea to say, look, these guys want to test software, but they're tired of testing hundreds and hundreds of bits of software. So they've taken it an extra step, and they're curating a list of apps that they've already tested, and then they're putting it in front of their early adopters and saying, look, you know, is this something you'd be interested in looking at? And we've had 15 out of 26 people come back and say, yes, they're interested. So from there, we will now engage with those people directly through that channel. And it means I don't have to spend all of my time trying to find people. We've kind of, you know, we've paid some money, but I've just got access to people that I need.
Okay, I get it. Thank you, John. So my offer will be, I more or less resume the last week, and I did few statements. So my offer is Daily Minds resources aimed to facilitate a child development to a full scope, including those life skills that will encourage resilience and mentally robustness to succeed over their lifespan. The customer job, what they want is happy kids, a nice family dynamic that can work smooth, have kids that reach their developmental milestone that are expected by their capacities, have kids that can manage some situation and take healthy decisions throughout their life. Like if they are bullied or they have a situation, a kid that offers something that is not healthy, you wish your kid have the tools to take healthy decisions in that situation. Pains. when children display challenging behaviors, family dysfunction, when the child have delays. No parents want that. They don't want to call you from the school or even if you're young people. So I will call that a pain. And the gain is happy kids, positive childhood, happy families, a smooth parenting, resilience, coping skills, which is self-awareness, self-confidence, low self-esteem. I mean, avoid that. And that's all for now. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really good. The one thing that strikes me in terms of those gains is they're still relatively they're slightly ethereal, slightly broad, and if you can try and come down into kind of more specific in terms of the jobs. Okay, what is the job that has to happen at a slightly more immediate level? I think just
Like,
worth exploring that in a little bit more detail as well.
for example, I can put reach milestone.
Well, I suppose
game.
just kind of more, I think more in terms of in that family dynamic, when you are, what is the immediate action and reaction that's going to happen? So at the moment, it's kind of quite broad in terms of, okay, we have happy kids, we have resilience, and we have things like that. But that's that's a little bit intangible. If you can just try and make it slightly more something you can grasp hold of, going, okay, this is the immediate thing that I have to do. So the stuff around, I have to feed my child, or I have to, I have to, kind of what is the process through which people are trying to achieve this at the moment. I know, just a bit, to be honest, I won't go into a lot of detail because I think we're going to cover some more of this again today, and it will give you a slightly more, a different way to look at it. But again, maybe we'll have another chat outside of the group.
Yeah, probably I will take one-to-one to clarify this, because I really struggle to put in words what I want or what they're gonna gain.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank
you.
I
think just as a general comment, the more that you can sort of layer this down more and more and be more and more particular, the better it is in terms of the clarity that you achieve. The sort of thing that John was talking about at the moment, they're just trying to get more and more clarity. So that applies to everybody. Judith.
Yes, may I make a short contribution to Mariella while it's fresh in my mind?
Yeah.
Is that okay, Anthony?
I'll
take 30 seconds. Listening very carefully to you, Mariella, I think your sale to whoever you're going to sell this to has got to be twofold. You've got to first sell the parent who has to buy and pay for your service. They have to be totally 120% on board. And the second part is the child has got to be part of this and want to do this. Now, most children until they're 12 or 14 take most of their guidance from their parents. So you will have to find a way of selling this to the parent first and convincing them that it is going to be of benefit to the parent and of benefit to the child. So to the parent, it will be more of a serious proposition. And to the child, it will be more of a fun, oh, great, let's do this. Because one of the things that may be in a parent's mind when deciding is this worthwhile? Is my child going to grow up too quickly? Is my child going to be cleverer than me and start telling me what to do at 8, 9, or 10? And you will have to show that the whole family can benefit. So I would recommend a two-way sale, a two-step sale, and there will be slightly different benefits for the parents and different benefits for the children. So that just occurred to me while you were speaking. I hope that's helpful.
Very helpful, Judy. Thank you so much. I just wrote down everything and I will get on it. Thank
Fantastic.
you.
Thanks. Carolyn, you're next to my line.
Okay, so I'm super confused. I have the last 2 weeks just been bouncing backwards and forwards between one target market, another, one idea and another, one direction and another, and I cannot get anything to stick right now. So I've spent the last week just going, I don't know. I just don't know. So yeah, I thought I'd come today with some definitive conclusion, but I think I'm stuck.
Right, okay. What are you most stuck on?
Well, because there's two very definitive directions that I could go with this. The one is go down the magazine journalist route. The other option is to go down an agency route. Two very different propositions.
So when you say go down the magazine journalist route, what do you mean by that?
Well, currently the website's set up as a kind of online magazine. It's information sharing. It's about disseminating information about cyber psychology to ex-target markets. And it's really about me pushing stuff out there. Agency route is looking at behavioral science from a technology, human interaction and behavior change with technology, and becoming a consultancy / agency. So two very different propositions, two very different ways of delivering a similar thing. So
okay, well, that, which is fine. I mean, I suppose it sort of comes back to that question that we were talking about last week, which is, but what is the problem that you're trying to solve? What is the jobs that people are trying to do? And how do you fit into that? I think today will be interesting because it will give you a slightly different way to look at all of this as well. But the fact that you have two is interesting, and there's no harm in doing an approach for both of those demographics, and by going through that process and do things and then deciding, okay, well, I'm going to try one. So by going through the process and going, okay, this is my market and this is what I'm going to do. That's plan A, and then there's plan B, which is this is my market and this is what I'm going to do. And so that's another. So I've just seen Tracy come on. That's a fantastic background you've got, Tracy.
Isn't it awesome? I'm impressed.
Great?
I'm so jealous, Tracy.
So professional. Whoa. Anyway, we'll come to that in a moment. Anyway, so let me just give you a very quick story. So there was a guy I saw years ago at a conference, and it's just saying, sometimes it doesn't matter what you do, you just need to take a decision. And the importance, so he gave this example, and he said that him and his wife were talking about whether they should have children, and thought, well, you know, the only way that you can make a decision is to come up and actually make that decision. But when it comes to children, if you make the decision and go, yes, we want them, and then you regret that, then you're a bit stuck. So they went the other way and said, look, I'm going to decide that definitively we do not have children. And then they were fine. It was like they'd made a decision and they could get on with their life, and they could stop going through the angst that they were going through trying to address this. And then, and they were very happy with that decision. And then over the next months, they kind of kept clocking, going, oh, look at that, isn't that sweet? And and you know, every time they saw a baby kind of thing. And after about 6 months, they thought, do you know what? We've made the wrong decision, and let's have a child. And then they made that decision, and then they went through that process, and then that felt right. But they only could ever get to that point because they had made that decision in the first instance. And I just thought it was a kind of very interesting little insight into, you know, well, you probably know more about this than I do because this is all in your field of psychology. But I think that is just kind of instructive. So in order to make that decision, go through two paths and work them both out, and then just see which one you kind of lean towards, and then go with that. And then if it's the wrong decision, you can change your mind 6 months' time, and that's absolutely fine. Anyway,
good advice.
We've got lots to cover, so I'm going to carry on. Judith, I turn to you now, please.
Yes, hello, thank you. I've been extremely busy with multiple things, so this has been at the back of my mind, not at the forefront of my mind like many of you. As I mentioned when we started, mine is a sort of umbrella health concept. I wish to help people, And to put it in a very short nutshell, Anthony, I have made a decision this week, today, after a lot of dithering, because of the situation we're in, which changes every day, that I must be in the middle of the health arena that I want to be in, to maintain contacts and understand what people really want. So that is number one. I've really made a decision today. And number two, the next thing I have to do is to what we call segment my market, as you're all talking about. I think Mariella, Carolyn, Cecile, I need to understand the people I want to sell to. And I think there may be as many as 6 different types of customers. And how are they going to buy the product? Because I've joined this group because I want to understand how to monetize whatever offering I make next in business. So in my health umbrella, I see maybe 4 to 6 different types of customers. There are those people who are very savvy and know how to inform themselves via the internet, via research on what might be wrong with them. They're interested, they're motivated, and they will go into a doctor, maybe with a list of questions like myself, and the doctors don't always like them. They call them the well-informed patient, and I class myself in that category. And there are a small group of us, but because doctors have always been seen as God for the last maybe 100 years, so nobody's really questioned them. But with the rise of the internet, we now have all this information at our fingertips. So they're a small group and growing. Maybe 20% of doctors' patients might be well-informed patients. The next are children.
Judith, sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
We've only got
Okay,
2
I won't
minutes.
go through all of them. That's
Yeah.
the gist of it. I have to
Okay.
decide how to segment my marketplace.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
I hope that's
Sorry.
helpful. I hope that's
Yeah,
filled
no.
my 30 seconds.
I think that you know, definitely it'd be worth having a conversation outside of this as well. And I think kind of just brings to mind, we're going to get to that point where having an outside influence would be good. So I'm going to step up and get some mentors set up, so there's a sounding board for everyone to go through. So I'll have that as my mission, to get together, not that they'll be ready for next week, but to have thought through and approach people by next week. Fantastic. So
Thank
John, can I turn to you now, please? John Grantham.
Hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can hear me. Oh, great. Yeah, somehow my mic didn't work last time. I never really worked out what the problem was, but yeah, it wasn't a deliberate ploy to avoid getting out of my homework or anything, promise. But yeah, I'm equally unprepared today as it happens, and that is just a pure coincidence. But I certainly have been given it lots of thought, but I suppose it's been brewing in my unconscious mind, and I haven't sort of put anything down on paper, but certainly I think it's not an easy one, because my business idea has got a social mission. It's about community cohesion, but I'm using my sort of the 2 elements of my business are as a social enterprise with a mission to help build community cohesion, and the revenue streams are the revenue is coming, the trading that we're doing, the services that we're providing are delivery services, transportation and logistics. So we'll be offering an alternative to, you know, the light goods vehicle, diesel vans. But the business model that I've come up with is a kind of synthesis of established last mile logistics business models that are already well established in cities like London, Cambridge, Southampton now as well, and so on. And what they do, sorry, I'm probably rambling a little bit, but I suppose because I wasn't able to sort of say anything last week, I thought you might allow me a little bit of leeway. But
keep going, John. That's
yeah,
okay.
yeah. Anyway, so it's what I've realised is that the idea of solving the problem of last mile logistics, which is this massive increase in diesel traffic on the back of the surge in internet shopping and COVID-19 and so on. You've got this massive demand, and it's causing a problem. It's it's putting extra pressure on the road network. It's creating lots of diesel particulate air pollution. And I found out a staggering statistic yesterday, actually. In the UK, air quality is twice as bad as it is typically in the United States. And that's because we've got a much bigger proportion of diesel vehicles in our sort of fleet. So in use, in America, petrol is the dominant fuel. So anyway, there's all these problems. So, but I didn't just want to do what they're already doing, and these business models are already well established and growing rapidly. So I can see cargo cycle logistics coming anyway. The big established operators are going to do that. So what I wanted to do was kind of something a little bit more niche that's inspired by that, but marries that with the idea of transition hubs. So so this is the idea, the initiative that's sort of been developed by sustainability initiatives like Transition Streets. I don't know if anyone's heard of the Transition Network, Transition Towns. It's about getting people together to support each other to live more sustainably. It's a sort of climate change, behaviour change initiative. And it's a kind of this idea that groups of neighbours get together and support each other with the transition to a more sustainable lifestyles. And that idea marries quite nicely with the idea of dense logistic delivery zones. So the key metric in logistics is deliveries per hour. So if you can do, if you've got a hub of 5 to 10 households, and you've got one delivery point for 10 households, you can do 10 households in one hit. So it's the ultimate kind of logistical efficiency thing. So I see your hands going up.
Yeah, no, we probably should.
Yeah.
I think the thing that comes across for me, John, is the idea is really interesting, and I think there's a lot of appeal for that. But what's the challenge you've got is that you're going to be operating in a pretty established marketplace, and that it's one of those things which theoretically looks great, and that on paper can be developed, but it's really trying to get into the core of what is that value proposition. And I've seen, not this idea, but I've seen similar sort of ideas which are based around an improved sustainability agenda, in applications for various grants and things like that. And what strikes me is that the motive most often comes from the point of view of people ought to be doing this because it's good for them and it's good for the environment. But what we get is that people don't care about what's good for them, what's good for the environment. They care about what they want now and what's going to support them now, which is why we all keep on using Amazon, despite the fact that we know that they don't pay their VAT. And so it's that sort of thing of trying to get to the understanding of what is it that's going to motivate somebody to want to connect with your bigger vision at a level where, and then it has to be based around the user. It's got to be, it's more convenient, or it's cheaper, or it's quicker, or it's, what are those things which are going to appeal to people? And what, again, we're going to dive into that a bit today. So hopefully this will give you a kind of different angle to consider those questions. But I think for me, when it comes down into the viability of the business, it can't be built on what is good for the world. It's got to be built on completely selfish needs, because that's what we as customers on the whole, as a mass, generally turn to, despite our better and our hopes. We have higher aspirations for ourselves than we really see through. But anyway, so thanks, John, for that. Tracy, could I ask, turn to you and ask how you got on over the last week?
Hi, thank you. So I've just been, my website went live last night, which was the most, I nearly lost the will to live, but it's live. Which is why I thought I'd just show it off a little bit today. But I found the value proposition is very challenging, because I know I'm already in a crowded market, and I know the kind of customers because I've been working with them over 10 years. But the difference for me is figuring out who's prepared to pay for online support instead of face-to-face. So actually niching even further into that value proposition is going to be an ongoing challenge, because it's beyond the usual stuff. I know what the pains are, and I know what the gains are. What I was looking at was, how do these potential customers feel? What really motivates them? And what you just said is so true. It's absolutely selfish. People are interested in how good they look online, what their status looks like, how much money they can make for their business. It's got nothing to do with the greater good. And it might have, but in the initial reason why someone's going to pay for the service is for selfish reasons, I think. So I'm trying to battle with that a little bit, you know, and think about, you know, if you do look at the website, I chose language very carefully to show that I really do understand how people feel about the problems that they're dealing with before they come to me, and why I'm the solution. So that was interesting. And then the other thing, being a crowded market, there's a lot of people who do social media training. I'm not unusual. So I have to work very hard on developing my presence online and building it out in my community. So I'm going to be actively marketing on LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube using video. And that's a challenge for me, because I've never used video. I've never used YouTube. However, I do have an audience on LinkedIn. I do have an audience on Instagram. So I'm going to start with what I have, and then I'm going to build it out from there. But I'm going to keep coming back to the value proposition, because it just brought up so many good questions about credibility, you know, the emotional connection people have to their work. And, you know, I've just got pages of notes here, but yeah, I think I could niche even further and really focus more on the variety of customers and who actually influences them to come to me, because that's another way to market. It's not just the person who buys, it's who's around them that can influence them to make that decision. So yeah, my head's kind of going, that's where I am. Oh, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I clicked it, but I clearly clicked mid-air or something like that. Yeah, that's great progress. Well done. I mean, I think, you know, that you're right. You know, you're in a very contested marketplace, and I was thinking about you when I was thinking through this presentation today. So I think it's going to be interesting, kind of how you respond to this, and kind of if any of this chimes with you at all. I don't know is the answer, is the honest answer, but we'll see what we can do. I've just noticed that I'm working in the kind of mezzanine floor with lots of Velux windows, and the rain's just started. So I don't know if you can all hear me okay, or if there's just this cacophony of sound, but let me know, because it could get noisy.
Yeah, we can hear you. You're okay.
Good. I will come back to my my drama training, and I shall project in a meaningful manner. Right. So, okay, let's let's go on. Mariella, do you need to leave at 11:30 today?
No, because I have my little one here.
Yeah, excellent.
It's half term, so it's okay.
Fantastic. Okay, oh, sorry about that. Let me get this up and then share my screen. Okay, here we go. Can you all see that? I bet you can hear the rain now. Okay, so okay, so this is something I've not really presented about a huge amount. So we'll see how it goes. Wish me luck. I'm hoping this is all going to make some sense and have some value. I think it's very interesting. So what I want to focus on is talking about. It's really looking at what's called the Blue Ocean strategy and the Blue Ocean process. Have any of you looked into this before? Cecile has, okay. Good, all right, well look, it's about a strategy of how to get people to buy your product or service, but it's also about trying to think about what Tracy was just thinking about. How do you start to slightly reimagine your product and service to make sure it doesn't directly compete with other people? Are there ways, are there techniques that you can start to try and find uncontested market space by doing a kind of proper review of the status quo and thinking about, is this actually something that people want? Is this something that people don't have already, despite the plethora of opportunities which are already available? And thinking a little bit about, it's not just about the way that we do things in this market, but how do people do things in other markets? And is there something that we can try and borrow or take from that, which is going to make a difference? So, you know, how can we create something which has got enough originality about it that people can't get it from somewhere else? And actually what we can start to do is to appeal to a customer base which isn't necessarily being served already. And that sort of chimes in with quite a lot of the things that you're talking about already. So you want to develop a product which can fill a niche that goes beyond current market expectations. Now, you know, everyone, I suppose, tries to do it, and it is very, very hard to make this work. So what the Blue Ocean strategy does is trying to add a little bit of science to the ambition to help make it happen. I mean, it's only partially a science. It still relies on making some of those leaps of imagination to fill in the blanks, but you've already started that, and that's why you're here. So what I want to do is to provide context for the flight fancy and to hold them against, I suppose, hold a mirror up to the mission to a large extent, and show what's important and what isn't. And again, get to that question. It picks up really naturally from what we talked about last week, because it's about understanding what people really want and what people are actually doing, and not delivering things just because they've been done before. Yeah, so Andrew said on week 1 that no matter what you do, there is always competition. And when you say, oh no, I don't have any competitors, that's not true, because people are trying to do things already. They may not be doing it in the way that you're going to do it. Great. What we're trying to do is to quantify, well, what is available at the moment? What is the competition doing at the moment? And how do we differentiate ourselves in a way which can then connect and chime with those audience groups? So you need to convince people that your product is the better option. And, you know, that's challenging. We all know that the old adage that nobody gets fired for hiring IBM. I think that was their catchphrase of the 60s or something like that. And also last week we talked about Serco being a safe pair of hands, which is why the government sort of turns to them despite the fact that they have big failures, but, you know, on the whole, they're okay. So what you need to do is to disrupt some of those established relationships that people have got with things already. So for John, you know, people will have relationships with Zero and with Sage and with, you know, other, you know, kind of more specialized apps. But you've got to try and disrupt that in order to put yours across in the way in which people go, ah, okay, yes, that's the solution I've always had. And John Grantham, you know, you've got the same thing. People have got relationships with people who deliver stuff already. You know, you've got Ocado out there, and you've got, you know, there was a lot of chat in the early stages of lockdown of people going, right, we've got to support local. We've got to support our local shops and have bicycle deliveries going from the high street to here, and of course nothing happened. So there is interest in there, but it does need somebody to coordinate all of that. And at the same time, it's got to get over user apathy and things like that too, which is a big thing to worry about. So let's start. I'm going to just kind of give you, this is a very quick overview of what Blue Ocean Strategy is. Right. So there's a very quick, I think in the profession, it's what they call a bum settler, where we all kind of get ready for it. So that's a quick overview of what this is. So let's start with three things that come out of this. Is how do we try and find a space so we create an uncontested market space? We want to create something which doesn't exist already. We want to try and create something which is not necessarily better than the competition, but something that is new and sits alongside the competition, and create something which doesn't exist in fields already. So I just thought, well, why don't we start by, you know, things which didn't exist, just going to give us I don't know, a little bit of thinking space. If we look back 30, 35 years, what didn't exist? I don't know, throw that out, open to you. Things which you thought would be there forever, but just aren't there anymore. Or things which have been created now, which we never expected to happen. Anybody got any thoughts, ideas? Throw them out there, things.
Phone.
Yeah.
Phones.
If it's 35 years ago, emails.
Emails, yeah.
And social media, the internet.
Exactly, yeah. Well, I think the internet existed 35 years ago.
Yeah, but in terms of the usability of it.
Yeah.
Uber, Airbnb.
Yeah.
I was saying this this software like Zoom that we can have the meeting online, I think was like maybe for high tech companies, and it was very difficult to set up, I remember.
Yeah. Well, you've got a much better list than some of the stuff I put down here. I just sort of added some things. Yeah, no, exactly. I got internet taxis, so that's kind of like an Uber thing. But yeah, smartphones, artificial intelligence, battery-powered cars. But there are also kind of other things like coffee bar chains didn't really exist. I mean, there was lots of coffee bars, but the chain concept didn't really exist. Other chains existed, but it's almost like, so what happened is that the coffee bar kind of like, essentially Starbucks looked around and borrowed that as an idea from a different sort of market, thinking, oh, we could apply this over here. And that means that we can kind of revolutionize that market as well. The same thing with budget air travel. And it's interesting, you can also see that now, in a way, took ideas from the trains, and now the trains have now taken ideas from the airline industry, which is why, trains are, you're now, in order to get the cheap price, you have to book in advance. You can't just turn up at the station like you used to be able to do 20 years ago and just pay a price. It's like, they've made it all competitive. It's kind of gamified the whole system to some extent. And then, there are things which, we used to have as, Tracy said, mobiles, but actually it's only smart mobiles. The other mobile industry doesn't really exist. And we talked about that last week, things like Nokia and BlackBerry, those are all gone. Game consoles, they keep changing, but not even 3G, now we're 4G, and we're about to go into 5G as well. I was thinking more laterally, thinking stripograms, the whole idea of the telegram doesn't actually exist. Maria's looking going, what on earth is a stripogram? Yeah, no, exactly, because these things don't exist. But it used to be that we, like you said, like Carolyn said, we got email now, so we don't need to send telegrams anymore. Things like that, things that might not exist. Facebook, I mean, is looking at the young generation, and they don't really care about Facebook, but they love Instagram, or they love TikTok. So already you can start to see how these things are changing. So there's this constant evolution that we're coming into, which is great because it means people are open to new ideas. There's always that risk of obsolescence. And the thing is, it's not because the ideas are bad, it's just because they become mainstream and then they become subject to competition as well. So if we look at red oceans, that kind of whole idea of the competition is that when something is successful, it starts to create a big supply chain. If one person get it right, then somebody else can get it right. The question is, can you kind of be up at the front? And if we put the clock forward by 15 years, there's going to be a whole load of new stuff out there, which none of which exists, although some of it might be stuff that you guys create now. So the red ocean is all about established markets, defined competitors, and what we would conceive as being the normal way to run a business in a specific industry. Tracy said there's already, some of those industries might be new, but already they're fairly saturated. There's like you said, there's no shortage of social media trainers. And it's called the red ocean because there's a lot of sharks out there all kind of searching for the same fish, and when they get into a feeding frenzy, it all gets a bit bloody, and that's why it's a red ocean, kind of the red ocean. And as I say, but calling customers as sharks is probably not the best way to approach things. And then so we could leaders. Let's go back to that Starbucks example. It was radical, it was ambitious, it became very profitable, and the success then spawned lots of other people who thought, oh yeah, I'd like to do something similar. So you get, Costa comes, and then Cafe Nero comes, and then Seattle Coffee Company comes along. I think they've gone again already as well. But you look at someone like Costa. What does Costa have to do to try and thrive in this industry? They have to essentially try and cheat the law by going against planning restrictions. They have to try and game the system. They have to ignore planning rulings which go against them and set up anyway, because they know that nobody's really going to care. So, you know, so it's quite a messy, you know, that's what that sort of red ocean means. You have to just push the boundaries because you're up against it. You know, closer to our own kind of worlds, you look at advertising, how advertising. So you have a big company like Publicis Group, and then they've seen massive introductions with the massive change with the introduction to digital, to the point where it was fearing for its future. And then you get companies like Sapient Razorfish and AKQA, and so by focusing on digital, started to develop brand new ways of looking at marketing and not even worrying about the old school marketing in terms of the big artwork and the designs and the brands. They just thought, oh, well, let's just focus on what people care about, which is the market that Tracy's kind of getting into now. All of that emerged to the point where, in order to survive, the big companies actually have to start buying out the other ones, because what the big companies are doing essentially is kind of what Crest does, or Procter and Gamble, is that for them innovation is, well, we have Crest Original, now we have new improved Crest, and now we have ultra deluxe improved Crest, and it's just this kind of iterative development, but essentially it's the same product, and you're still competing against Colgate and Arm & Hammer and everybody else who's working in that same field. So it's just all gets quite messy, and in a way they end up competing with themselves, and innovation is sort of illusory. So, and just to kind of give that a little bit of context, the interesting thing is it's not even efficient. Coming up with another product, which is similar to ones which exist already, is that this is from a study of 108 businesses business launches in the USA. So 86 of these % were these product extensions like the Crest, and then only 14% were truly kind of new product ideas. But the impact that 86% has in terms of increase in revenue was just at 62%. And in terms of the profit that made, it was just 39%. So out of these 14 genuine new product approaches, it had a 38% impact on the increase in revenue, and it had a 61% of the profit. So the shorthand of this is, you guys are all doing the right thing, because you're all trying to kind of get into this new thing, or at least that's the space that you want to be in, certainly. The problem that we have is that the companies operating in those red oceans have more experience and more money. So it's harder to make inroads against them. Taking on an industry leader is going to be really hard, because they can ultimately throw money at trying to keep one step ahead, or they can throw money at business development, or marketing, or pitching, or pricing. So it's very hard to try and undercut them, because if you undercut, they can then undercut, and then they compete on price because they've got more money than you have. The other side of that, of course, is that they can't innovate themselves, so they might be interested in buying you. And so that's the other thing, is that if you can understand what the market leaders, what their interests are, if you can start to make some sort of inroads into that market, in order for them to maintain competitiveness, they're going to have to buy you in a way that Instagram has got bought up, and TikTok's been forced to kind of have an alliance. But in terms of Facebook seeing it's kind of facing obsolescence, and so they have to try and keep innovating. But the other good thing, of course, is that the established businesses tend to focus on staying and developing their business as it exists. That's how they're structured. That's what their management structure is all about, maintaining the status quo and trying to extract maximum profit from doing that. So that's good. So they're not thinking of doing what you're thinking of doing. So there's less competition in that respect. It's just the danger is they then panic when they see you, or the opportunity is they try and buy you when they see you. So that's good and bad. Right, so to give you a kind of a silly example of that, I suppose, is that in terms of, therefore, you've got to try and create a genuinely new product. So I was looking at the fashion industry. So let's say you look at the fashion industry. You want to create. You're an agency. You specialize in promoting fashion companies, And you look around and you think, okay, what's going to change, and what does everybody do? What's the kind of the common way of doing this? And the common way of doing this is that, you know, we have a lot of sour-faced, miserable anorexics, and you're thinking, well, no wonder things are struggling. You know, there's just not a healthy way of promoting things. So you think, let's do something different. We are going to create the Happy Bunny Agency. So you're going to create lots of lovely artwork, and it's going to be full of smiley, happy people. And you launch it, and it's different, and it's vibrant, and it's got people who are kind of more normal, and it's postmodern, and but it doesn't have any more success than any of your predecessors, because it turns out that the trouble in terms of the fashion industry is it's not that people are bored of the models, it's that they don't need artwork now. It's not the models, but advertising in general, which is the thing that's not working, because consumers are getting their fashion interests satiated by reading what an Instagram blogger is talking about, you know, kind of what's coming up on TikTok. So the whole market, so it's just about making sure that the idea that you have is not radical, but it's actually still a Me Too product, just a kind of different set of clothes that you're putting onto it, to pardon the pun. So it's got to be true innovation. So let me give you some examples of what I mean and kind of how to put this into this blue ocean context. So the circus industry. So this is something which is looking at, so by the way, this is, here you go, this is the Blue Ocean. This is the follow-up book, The Blue Ocean Shift. It's done by W. Chan Kim and Rennie Malborn, and they are both, were both lecturers and researchers at university who got together to develop this strategy. So it's a very interesting book. So 35 years ago, and these are, sorry, some examples which they've put together from this. So 35 years ago, they looked at what happened in the circus industry in America. You know, the circus industry was a very well-trodden business model. Everyone who went knew what to expect. There were animal shows, and there were star performers. You know, people who, star performers, and they also had multiple arenas. So they would have, you know, 2 or 3 arenas. So there wasn't just one central place to look at. And they also, the business model was underpinned by aisle concession sales of people going around selling peanuts and juice and kind of whatever, and popcorn to people. So if you wanted to compete, the way that people thought that they should compete was like this. They go, okay, if we've animal shows, we need bigger animals. You know, we spend more money on getting better star performers, you know, bigger clowns, bigger trapeze acts, things like that. But the issues that they had in competing was that actually the trend was going away from animals. You know, animal rights was taking on a lot more prominence. People didn't necessarily actually want to see it. They felt uncomfortable about seeing something like this, where you've got you know, people sitting on the back of elephants doing things which they would never naturally do in real life. You know, plus you've got really expensive vet bills. You've got a pretty mopping up job afterwards as well with the elephants, I'd imagine, and they're hard to transport. So if you're moving around, that's really hard. Star performers, you think, okay, well, you need to get somebody bigger, better, and, you know, whatever, but they cost more, and it meant that you had to fill more space in order to be able to justify the costs of the people who you were hired to try and bring those in. With the multiple show arenas, you know, you have 3 rings up, but people didn't know where to look, weren't quite sure what was that they were looking at. What is this show? Where are we going to be? And again, that meant you had more space to fill, so that means you've got more costs. And then with the aisle concessions, although the circus owners loved it because that gave them extra revenue, the audience didn't like it because they just felt, you know, it was overpriced, they were being ripped off, and the high prices were discouraging a certain amount of sales already. And so, 1, you're pushing against all this, but 2, the whole market had moved on as well. So you were, the circus people were fighting against the other circus people, but a bit like my Happy Bunny example. The market had changed. that wasn't who the competition was. The competition was not other circuses. The competition were the movie industries. So in terms of getting a bigger star performer and be the biggest trapeze artist in the world, nobody had ever heard of them anyway. You only knew them if you were in the circus industry, and they could never compete with Tom Cruise or go and see Nicole Kidman or Meryl Streep or whoever it was. Yeah, the names, there were bigger names out there, and the circus names had just dwindled too far. The Houdini days had gone, let's say, and they were just a bigger and higher cost. So that was the market that was there. It was established. There were some really big players in there, but it was full of holes and it was gaps. So into this market, in concept of what the circus should be, Cirque du Soleil. So has anyone been to see Cirque du Soleil? Yeah. So quite a few of you know it. And have you all been to the circus as well? Okay, so you've done, okay, that's interesting. Here's what happened in the Cirque du Soleil example. So bear with me 1 second. Okay. So they could see this traditional circus was sort of dying on its feet somehow, and they mapped out what did and didn't work. So they thought, okay, what is it that people, what gets people to the circus? And what was actually getting people to the circus was people like clowns, people like trapeze artists, and people kind of like the sense of occasion, the tent, being in the big tent, the big top. Yeah, there was something about that. And then they thought about, well, what didn't they like? What could we get rid of in that whole experience, which wouldn't really change the way that things are? So they let me put it into this. So they're kind of mapping all of this out and thinking, okay, what can we do? So they looked at the two leading proponents. So there was a company called Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey, and they were the two mega circus outfits in America at the time. So they looked, what do they all do at the moment? So they all of these companies, and they also looked at the small circuses, which weren't as big, but were sort of, you know, didn't have as big ambitions, but were trying to do the same thing. They all had low prices. They all kind of went for this idea of star performers and kind of promoting what they were doing with these star performers. They all had shows, all relied to a large extent on aisle concessions. And they kind of kept changing the format. There was these multiple shows, you know, there were multiple show arenas, the kind of different places that you had to try and look at. But they all had fun and humor. They had the thrills and the danger, so and they had the trapeze artists. But they were in the same place. There was that kind of the big top thing, but it was kind of inside, it was still just a tent kind of inside. So they looked at that and thought, well, hold on, what do people actually like? Well, and what can we do with this? They don't care about star performers, don't care about animal shows, don't like the aisle concessions, don't the multiple show arenas. So all these things that the industry, actually people didn't really want half of that stuff. So then they thought, well, if we can get rid of those, what do we need to do? How do we try and enhance that? So, okay, definitely like the fun and the clowning sort of stuff, the thrills and the danger sort of stuff. And ideally, what we want to try and do is to get away from this charging a low price, because then that just makes profitability really hard. Can we charge a higher price? So they went out and they did some research and they looked at, well, actually a unique venue, that would be interesting. Something which attracts people, maybe attracts an audience who wouldn't even go, because people didn't want to go to the big top because it's got sand on them. You know, you can't wear nice shoes when you're going out. And if you're on a night out, well, the circus doesn't really appeal in that. It only appealed to a particular traffic. So how can we try and attract people who like something else? People who aren't far away from that whole market, but need a nudge. So try mapping out who like a spectacle, people who like going out at night or even in the daytime, people who like music, people who like acrobatics, people who like clowns. And I'm thinking, there's an answer there. Don't go the circus, but do things, and they're the people who go to musicals, to ballets, and to other shows like that. So there's this whole kind of audience that would never think about going for a night out at the circus, but they like a lot of the same stuff. So, you know, so that idea of introducing an element of sophistication to it, something which you could actually boast about at the dinner party, which you couldn't really do in the circus so much. So they made it more sophisticated. They gave the clowns a makeover. They also introduced this whole idea of a theme. So there was a story that then chimed in with what people were doing in the musicals and in the ballet. They provided better quality music and introduced dance around the acrobatics as well. And then they took away the star performer element because nobody really cared about that anyway. They just wanted good performers. And if you had good performers as more of a kind of democratized performance unit, it meant suddenly you could do it anywhere. You weren't reliant on people coming to see one star. So that meant you could start to perform the same show in multiple locations. You design it once and then do it many times. So that opened up multiple productions. And then they introduced the artistic kind of music and dance side of it. And everything comes focused on the show, not the people, not the animals. It's about the show. And if the show is all important, it's then repeatable. And you can repeat it and you can repeat it, and then it's scalable. So that's how all of this mapped out. And then they did another thing, which they just kind of something to aim for, is just thinking that what they call the ERRC grid. So eliminate star performance shows, animal shows, aisle concessions, multiple show arenas. Reduce the fun, the humor, the thrill and the danger. Raise the unique venue, and create the theme, a refined environment, the multiple productions, and the artistic music and dance. So that's how they went approaching and thinking about trying to systematically map out, what does my market look like? What is the competition point in this market? How do we try and find a way to directly appeal to customers in a slightly different way? And they created this idea of value innovation. So the value innovation is created when a company's, what the company does improves both its cost structure, which means, you know, you pay less, but you can maybe have a more value to the proposition, which means you can then charge more. So the cost savings are made by eliminating and reducing the things which the industry competes on, but the customers don't really like. And the buyer value is lifted by raising and creating elements in the industry doesn't actually do, but people really want, the things which haven't been offered before. So over time, the costs are reduced further as economies of scale start to kick in as well, because you can start to create a higher sales volume. So the creation of Blue Oceans is about driving costs down at the same time. So drive costs down at the same time as bring the value up. And then that's what they call value innovation. I don't know, the value, it's all kind of that's kind of where it all kind of gets a little bit sort of, oh, aren't we clever with the words that we've come up with, in my humble opinion. But I think the basic premise is still solid. You know, that they call this a whole system approach, and that's what makes the creation of Blue Oceans sustainable. So, so it's not just products. I mean, this is kind of an idea that you can think about in other ways. So this is something which is, I kind of termed as concept innovation. I thought this was really interesting as well, of just thinking about things in a slightly different way. So you're all familiar with the idea of the designated driver? So, no? Never heard of a designated driver? Okay, so a designated driver is basically, you know, you go out with your mates, and the designated driver is the person who's going to drive, and you all go, okay, right, so you're not drinking tonight because you're going to be the driver. And in the 80s, the designated driver essentially was just a bit of a sap. You know, it was the loser, the person that lost the flip of the coin and could be the butt of the jokes for the evening of going, no, you can't have a drink. He can't drink because he's driving. Loser. Yeah. So that was the approach that people had. So then Harvard came. Some lecturers at Harvard came up with this idea of going, what about if we just shift the perception of what the loser who's got drawn the short straw and can't drink tonight, and give them, why don't we turn them into a superhero? Can we do that? And then actually they don't become the loser, they become the hero of the evening. So they came up with this idea and they called it the designated driver. And they gave that sort of loser job a official title. And then they worked with TV production in Hollywood and film production in Hollywood and said, look, can you start to use this term? So if you look at programs in the late 80s, early 90s, you'll find that suddenly people from nowhere go, oh no, I'm the designated driver, with a slightly resigned face, but everyone, oh, okay. And what happened is that people went, oh, there's a title for this job. I can get called a designated driver, and that latched on, and people kind of grabbed hold of that and went, okay, that's what I'm going to be. And so when you went to the pub and people said, hey, do you want a drink, mate? And said, no, I'm the designated driver. You could almost imagine the cape flapping behind them as they reached this superhero status and went, yes, that's who I am. And everyone was then grateful to them and went, bow down to the designated driver. It'll be my turn next week. So what you can do is you can create a whole new product identity without actually having to create or build anything. It's just about creating a shift in perceptions. And it's interesting, I remember seeing an episode of Friends, I think, or something like that, and going, oh, look, it's in there. And a couple of them pop up and you can just see, and it's all of that has been artificially planted by these lecturers from Harvard. So let's look at another example of what I'm talking about. So this is the strategy canvas of the US wine industry. Or this, so it's slightly out of date, but cast your mind back 20 years. So these guys, Chan Kim and René Malbon, looked at how did the US industry work. And there were basically two ways, and they both were exactly the same. So you had the premium wine category and you had the budget wine category. And what they were interested in is saying, okay, so price. Well, premium wines, we want to charge a high price. Budget wines, we want to charge a low price. But what sells wine is people knowing how good it is for them. So this kind of picks up on a little bit on what we were talking about with John earlier on. That if you are, so they use words like terroir, earthiness, or you can smell the rhubarb in that, or the strawberries, and it was all about the bouquet. It was about the enological terminology of things, which made it all sound very impressive. And that's kind of how everybody sold the wine. So they would do above the line marketing. If the wine was older, clearly it was better. If there was a vineyard prestige, so it's premier cru or second cru or third cru. And they talk about the complexity of the wine, of going, oh, it's got dark notes, chocolate notes and rich tannins and things like that. And then they would try and have a wide range because there was a lot of choice. So that was the same across all wine sales. So then along come Casella wines, and they start to think, okay, well, can we change this? How can a new market be? How can we engage a new market? Because essentially, if you come in with a new wine, you have to compete at that level. You're in that same thing. You're talking about the same old stuff that everybody else is talking about. So how do you differentiate in that market? You need to do something different. And in order to do something different, what you want to try and do is to capture people who aren't necessarily wine drinkers. But then you have to think about, well, what's the closest you can get to why aren't they wine drinkers? Try and understand, why is that market? So there are people who consume alcohol, very happy to drink, they just don't drink wine. They don't see themselves as wine drinkers. Why is that? So when you kind of look through this, then they kind of think, okay, well, this whole kind of use of terminology and complexity, it just felt elitist. It was putting people off. It felt too complicated. This big wide range was too complicated. The chances are, the danger was you would choose the wrong wine, and then where would you be? Oh my goodness. So people were worried about choosing badly, and people didn't actually like the complexity. There was a whole market out there who, the fact that it had this, this smell of seaweed in the Pinot Noir did not provide any attraction at all. That just put them off as well. So then where does the closest market come from? So along came Yellowtail. And they thought, well, why don't we find a wine which non-drinkers like? People like, in those days, people liked Alco Pops. People liked, gin and lemonade. Why don't we try and attract some of those people towards wine? But in order to do that, we've got to just get rid of all of this complexity and all these things that put those people off. So we can have soft, fruitier, sweeter, consistent stuff. And whatever bottle you have, it's not going to change year by year. There's not going to be good years and bad years. It's going to be the same all the time. So you always know what it is you're going to get. We're going to get rid of the jargon. We're going to have a nice, easy to recognize label. And we're going to get rid of the chateau kind of picture, which everyone seemed to have. Here's a picture of a building, which is how wine was usually sold. And we'll have something fun, something which kind of goes, this is good, and we're going to do one white and one red. So I think they had one Chardonnay and one Shiraz. And that just makes it really simple. And when you went along in the supermarket and you were looking at the wine list, you kind of the rack of line, it's like going, oh my goodness, look, color on the label. Nobody really seen color on the label. Oh, fun identity as well. And so obviously the wine industry hated it. They just thought, oh, this is a complete cheapening of the whole thing. So, so looking at the demand side of the alternatives of beer, spirits, ready-to-drink cocktails, that captured 3 times as many consumers in the US as who drank alcohol as wine. So that's a 3-fold bigger market that you've got over the established market that you're working in. So what Casella did was they kind of really recognized that the way that wine was promoted and sold was just putting people off. And by getting rid of some of that pretentiousness and getting rid of some of the challenges in the flavor, it just suddenly opened up this market to that extra 3/4 of the market, which currently was the alcohol market, that was currently untapped. Now, Yellowtail could have been developed by a company which already made fruitier, sweeter wine, but everyone was competing in that same space. Everyone saw themselves in the same way, and in a way that the boundaries had been set of going, this is concept wine sales, and nobody really thought beyond that. So it took a newcomer to come in and completely radicalize and shake all of that up. But it was hugely successful. I can't remember what the stats are. They just took something like 25% of the wine market when they came in. They just took it all up, and they also introduced a whole new crowd into wine that nobody had. So if we come back into this grid again, they wanted to get rid of all the kind of the archaic difficult terminology. They wanted to get rid of the fact that it gets older and take away some of the guesswork. They got rid of some of the above the line marketing, which was just so expensive. They wanted to reduce the complexity, make it smooth and easy, get rid of the range, and get rid of this whole idea that it belongs to a vineyard, because that was just a bit wanky, really. Sorry, I shouldn't say that, was the wrong expression. Anyway, then they wanted to raise because people liked it, you could charge a little bit more. So it wasn't a budget wine, it was just a nice wine. And also then work with the retailers in terms of going, well, who are your channels? Who's going to promote this for you? Who's going to champion you? Who are people trusting already? Where are those relationships? So John, you think about who's got the relationships? They've got relationships with, who do those people trust already? Where do they go to in order to be able to use in order for them to start championing what you had? So when they sold this, I think they would go into supermarkets and they would give them boomerangs and kind of cork hats, and just kind of made it cheap and tacky. But that was the people who they were attracting, some of the cheap and tacky market who hadn't been attracted to wine. They just wanted to shake it all up and just make it easy drinking, easy to choose, and just a sense of fun and adventure. So that's just starting to think about how you do it. So cut unnecessary elements, diverge a bit, and also come up with a compelling tagline. And the tagline isn't necessarily the marketing strategy, but just that clarity of what you're doing, so it appeals. It comes back to what we talked about last week, directly connects in with what the value proposition is, and just being really clear on what that is. Right, so define and break the red ocean. Okay, so right, we're gonna spend some time looking at this, of how we do this for ourselves. Cecile.
Sorry, could you just go back to what we need to focus on, that last?
Okay.
Thank you, thank you.
So the focus is about, sorry, I'm feel like I'm talking too long, so if I'm rushing, yeah, feel free to stop me. So the focus is about identifying and understanding what are the unnecessary elements in the market already. You know, what are the things that people just assume is the way? So, you know, in the world of books and in the world of storytelling, what are just what's the accepted narrative that you have within that industry? And think, but actually, some of that's just a pain. You know, some of that's just, you know, actually not necessary, and it's not really what people want. But we're just in the habit, you know, because when we go back to the examples that we looked at the beginning of, you know, what was around 35 years ago and what wasn't around 35 years ago, you know, things change. What was current is no longer current, and our attitudes move on and our expectations move. So that means naturally that the established norms of an industry are going to change. So it's about trying to identify what they are and then diverge and think, okay, the world has moved on. We are doing things in a different way. What is it that we can provide which is going to make the service better? You know, for the wine industry was, you know, about reducing the complexity, just making it soft, making it fruity, making it very palatable in a way that the wine wasn't. And with Cirque du Soleil, it was about having a theme. It was about introducing music. It was about bringing sophistication into an unsophisticated marketplace. And then the compelling tagline is just that clarity of purpose around which, so it sort of starts looking into brand proposition, which we'll come on to in a few weeks' time. But, you know, just thinking about, well, what is the brand? How do we articulate that? But for you, the important thing is that you've got clarity about what that differentiation is, because that's what it is that you're going to be promoting to others. Okay, so I think we're going to have a chance to start to look at this now for ourselves. So, yeah, I suppose that's interesting. Don't focus on being the best within a defined industry. It's not about you being better than anybody else. It's about you finding something which other people aren't doing and just being a bit different from other people and being able to put that forward. You know, don't just accept the buyer groups, the kind of, you know, the traditional routes through which things are bought and sold and the reasons for them. You know, it's again about finding that differentiation. And again, the example we had earlier on, and with the whole Crest toothpaste, don't focus on the same competitive threats. You know, it's about, in terms of developing the strategy, it's about really understanding your uniqueness. Now this whole idea, I suppose, comes, you know, a lot of it comes from out of the corporate milieu, let's say. And I know that for you guys, you are already, you're one step ahead in all of this. So some of this might think, yeah, but I think that anyway. And hopefully you do, because that's where you ought to be in terms of creating a whole startup idea. But I think it's still useful to think about the context within which you fit, about kind of what the wider platform is. And just kind of remembering, I suppose in a way, kind of remembering where your customers are at, their mindset. Because if you just throw something in and it's not really been thought through in terms of the context of their experience, it can be a bit confusing. And the more you understand and appreciate the experience that they have right now, then the better able you are to position what it is that you want to do. So, so I sent some stuff through yesterday. Hold on. I've just seen there's lots of.
Can I just say this thing quickly here?
Yeah.
I was listening to a story about an idea about being innovative but not too novel and having the familiar. And they used the example of Spotify when they wanted to introduce new music to people, and they said, you know, every month or something they'll put together 30 new labels, new songs, whatever, and so people can listen to them and expand. And it had no uptake. It wasn't very popular. And there was a bug in the system at one stage, and what happened, it kept on throwing some of the familiar songs into that mix. And that was picked up much better and engaged much more. And the idea then being it's that if it's too novel, it's too far off what people want to do. It's too far away. And what you need to do is what you need to do is that if it's something's familiar but with a new strand on it, it offers a new opportunity to them rather than being, you know, sort of too alien. I just wanted to, I thought that was quite fascinating.
Yeah, no, that's I hadn't heard that before. It's a really interesting anecdote. I mean, I suppose you can kind of see how that works. That quite often, you look at Netflix and love film, and in a way, some of these things were slightly too early to the market.
Yeah.
So you can come in before the market's for them, and so understand. So again, that's kind of why this is useful in terms of understanding where the market at and how you then evolve something. And again, comes back to that question about competition, is that nothing is null because people are doing things already, and understanding what they're doing and how this enhances that experience. So it's just a natural kind of next step on from the value proposition canvas, really. You know, what is it that you are, what is that natural next step? But that's really interesting in terms of keeping, you know, I suppose kind of keeping things which people, I suppose it comes back to the Cirque du Soleil thing. You know, people like the trapeze artists and people clowns, and so you don't want to throw it all out. That if you kind of got rid of all of that, then suddenly actually what you're doing is just creating a ballet. You know, as opposed to kind of having that sense of circus, but it's circus on, well, steroids or whatever you want to say. It's just a very different experience.
Yeah, so it's taking those things and then putting. I think that's really interesting. That the ERCC thing.
Yeah.
ERC.
Judith. Oh, you're on mute, Judith.
Hello, is that okay?
Yeah.
On the Cirque thing, what occurred to me as you were showing all the animals is to look at the wider marketplace maybe and see how attitudes are changing, because the wider concern about climate change and about imprisoning animals and making them perform, the world has moved on and customers have lost their taste for it. So I understood perfectly your Cirque du Soleil innovation. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, well,
And
absolutely.
I think the same thing will happen to zoos in the next 5 years.
Yeah, yeah.
So
No,
there we are. People
yeah.
will want to see them released into the wild, and that might offer an opportunity for more reasonably priced safari adventures. You know, at the moment, safari type holidays are very, very expensive. So there might be an opportunity for cheaper type safari holidays to see animals in their natural habitat.
Well, I think that's true, Judith. You can see, so in Bristol, the zoo there has a big tract of land, and it started to do that. So it's creating a safari park in the country, which then makes it a kind of affordable to get to. But you're seeing people in a much more natural habitat, right? And it's that sort of you're absolutely right about that sort of thinking in terms of you can't just stick with the business as usual, as you say. Attitudes change, so I can begin to see that happening already. So what I'd like to do with this is to get to this stage for yourself, and so this is 4 steps of visualizing a strategy. So visual awakening. So let's have a look at this. So this is about really understanding where you're at the moment. So it's there are sort of several steps to go through in order to try and get to this kind of overarching identity. And so the first step is kind of understanding where we're at, what the market is at the moment. So if we look at this thing here, so all of this part here on the left-hand side is all about the established, you know, what's established right now, and then this other part is about what you're going to do next. So this first thing is about the first part, the left-hand side. What does the market look like at the moment? What are the norms that you've got in the market? What is the accepted practice? So if we can just try and understand that a little bit, you can understand, you know, kind of start to kind of think about, well, what's not what's not working, and the questions that need to ask. I think, to be honest, these bits here probably are a bit more applicable to kind of more established companies in terms of thinking, well, what are they doing at the moment? But you're coming with a new idea, so this is kind of a little bit more on. It's not about what you're doing necessarily, not your core strength, but what is the core strength of the market? You know, kind of how does the market at the moment look at and can see itself? And then the next thing is about customers. Now we're going to talk about this in a lot more depth next week, kind of in terms of connecting with customers, kind of how to try and find some strategies to do that. But sort of trying to undertake some of that market research and understanding their problems rather than your own ideas. You know, what it is that they don't like and what it is that they do like. And then these can all help in terms of ratifying your own products. I'm going to show you another video, just give you a change of view. And so, hold on a second, let's come to about, right, so this is Joe Gebbia. He is one of the co-founders of Airbnb. And there's a bit of preamble, but I just think it's kind of interesting just because they're such a phenomenally successful company that's, you know, come from startup and similar position to you're at. So I'll play a little bit of this because I think it's kind of interesting story, but certainly kind of when we get up into you know, figuring it out, it's really starts to focus on the market research side of things and just to start thinking about how you can approach that.
There's a design conference coming to San Francisco, and there's not a single place to stay in the city. And I'm looking around the apartment, seeing all the space in the living room, thinking, wait, there's all this space. What if we took an airbed out of the closet, we blew it up on the floor, and we hosted guests who needed a place to stay? We called Brian, said, Brian, we're going to throw airbeds on the floor, and we're going to host guests this weekend. We launched just in time for South by Southwest. And we had about 10 people list their place in Austin, and a total of 2 reservations, one of which was Brian. So we were not with success. It did not take off like a rocket ship. In fact, I would call it a miserable failure at that point. Well, we actually had 20 introductions to investors throughout Silicon Valley. 10 of those people replied to our email. 5 of them met us for coffee. 0 invested in Airbnb. And talk about a tough time. You've got some of the smartest people in the world. You know, they picked some of the most well-known companies that we all love and use today, from Google's and PayPal's and YouTube's. And they're telling us that our idea is crazy, that it's not going to scale, that people aren't going to stay in people's homes around the world. Kind of the world thought we were crazy. It was late one night in the kitchen. Ryan and I are trying to keep our spirits up, and we're brainstorming crazy ideas like, what if we provided breakfast to go along with the airbeds of Airbed and Breakfast? It's the middle and the height of the political conventions and campaigns. So we thought, well, let's make them politically themed. We'll call one Obama owes the breakfast of change. We'll call the other Cat McCain's Maverick and Every Bite. One thing led to the other. We ended up making cereal boxes and selling online for $40 a box. We ended up making $20,000 on breakfast cereal. So, little known fact, the Obamas not only got us to 0, like that's something we're proud of, we got us to 0, but we then got introduced to Paul Graham. Paul Graham. He's calling to tell us that we've been accepted to Y Combinator. And so what we later found out is the reason that Paul let us in, well, because he thought our idea was amazing. And I thought it was kind of weird. It's because we saw that with the breakfast cereal, we could figure out how to do anything. And that's how we got into Y Combinator.
Do you know Y Combinator, if you don't know, is one of the original accelerators, and Paul Graham was the founder of it.
It's our very first office hours with Paul Graham. He's looking at Brian, Nate, and I, and he goes, so we're market. And we kind of look at each other and we're like, thinking to ourselves, we don't really have a market. No one's using our service. But there are some people in New York who are renting out their homes. And Paul goes, so your customers are in New York City and you're here in Mountain View. Go to New York City. You pull up the 20 house and search results. You realize something. that the photography, the images of their listings are not very good. So we kind of had this realization, we can solve that problem. We know how to take a good photo, but it's not scalable. That's the thing, is that up until this point, we had tried to solve problems in a scalable way, which I think I would call like some of the mythology of Silicon Valley, is that you have to solve problems in a scalable way. That one line of code has to meet the needs of hundreds, tens of thousands, or hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people. So Paul Graham comes along and basically gives us this message, which was the single greatest piece of advice we ever got. Go meet your people. Do things that don't scale. It'll teach you. You'll learn from it. So we fly to New York that weekend. We rent a camera with a wide-angle lens, and we go from door to door throughout Manhattan and Brooklyn. So here we are in the environment of our customers, now watching them use our product in real time. And we're seeing a lot of things that we didn't know were problems. We got so close that we got to step into their shoes for a moment and see the world through their eyes and really see the pain points that they were feeling. And that to me is like, that's the basics of innovation. You take an enlightened, empathetic point of view for your customers. You combine it with your own unique point of view of the world to create something new. You know what?
Right. So I thought that was kind of interesting on a couple of things.
Excuse me, Anthony, I didn't hear a single word of that video. Could I trouble you to email it to me? It's Judith.
Oh, right, okay. Was that the same for everybody else? No, you all heard it? No.
I couldn't hear it. Sound quality was very poor for me. That's why I turned my video off. But yeah, I could only catch the odd word.
Ah, okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Well, well, that's it. The whole thing's ruined now. Sorry, I've got to go.
Sorry, I really didn't even catch a single word.
Fine. Okay. Well, look, okay. I think there was a bit of a problem with the video last time as well, but okay, that's interesting to know, and I will send the link out certainly later. But essentially, the long and the short of it was just saying that first of all, it started off with Airbnb, talking about Airbnb being it was definitely not an overnight success when it started. It was a bit of an abject failure. But what was interesting was that they did a couple of other things around that, is that they thought, okay, let's create some cereal to go with the B&B. So they created these cereals based around the political campaign of the time, and they had something after Obama and something else after John McCain. And they sold it at about $40 a box, and they made $20,000. So I thought that was interesting, because it just means that the ideas, no idea is necessarily wrong. It's not what they went on to make their fortune with. At the time, they probably thought, God, let's just go in the cereal business. But what it did do was it then gave them the inspiration to, the kudos with this guy, David Graham, who's the head of the incubator, the Y Combinator Incubator and Accelerator program. So they got onto the program, and he was just saying, well, look, where are your customers? And they said, they're in New York. So, well, look, go to your customers, go and talk to your customers, go and see what they're doing. And it just was really instructive. Through that process of talking to their customers, they got a much better understanding of what their product was. Because they had one idea of what the product was, but the customers then changed it. And then the customers kind of then had, by talking to them, they were able to give some of the customers ideas, and that helped to improve the product overall. But I'll send you the link. I've also got a slight problem, is that my computer, one of my screens has just died. So can't actually see what I want to talk about and you guys at the same time and the presentation. So, so I think the best thing to do is that you can all talk about me behind my back for 3 minutes and say what a crap video experience that was. And I'm going to just log out for a second and then log back in, and hopefully that problem will sort the problem out. So I will be back in a couple of minutes. Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
So Mariella, you started watching wine now from Yellow. You started drinking wine from Yellowtail.
Yes, because I'm not a drinker of wine. Actually, doesn't like the taste. And I tried this one, and I say, okay, that's the one that I can drink socially, and you know, be a drinker without being. And I love it. And they have a few brands with the colors.
Yeah.
So I don't know nothing about wine. So for me, it's easy to pick it. It's easy to send it someone to buy it. They did a great job because I'm not a drinker.
I know, and they set up then a whole new world of markets, because then you can go and buy your elephant wine and your you know, so it just also brings in the countries as well. So there's that connection. Very clever.
Yep.
Cecile, I'd love to know where you're from, because you're South African as well, right?
Zimbabwe.
From Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
I think we all sound the same, don't we?
Excuse me, did anyone hear what he just said about when Airbnb first didn't succeed? But it was David Graham who was head of the incubation hub. At what? Did he say the David Sullivan Show? Go meet your people.
I'm not too sure, Judith, but we can ask Anthony when he comes back, or he'll probably send the link over later today for you to listen to the full thing properly.
Okay, thank you.
I think generally on Zoom, video just doesn't work because it's streaming on one system and then it slows it down when it streams it out to us. So I think maybe for future reference, we just get links and we can watch it on our own.
Sure. Yeah, I'll make a note of that. I'll make a note of that.
Because I think the value is being able to talk about what we're learning rather than struggle with tech.
Yeah, so Tracy, so in that, were you struggling to find out who your market is? Has that made it feel a little bit, can you pinpoint now a little bit further down?
Yeah, I learn something new every week, I have to say.
Every day.
Because, you know, I think the danger is if you've worked in industry for a long time, I like the word fatigue, because you stop listening and you stop hearing what's going on. It all becomes very samey. And I really had to pull myself out of my comfort zone to figure it out, because the biggest barrier for me that always comes up is people don't have time. Why? They don't have time to do social. I wish I could find a solution, because I would love to create a product that actually is not so automated, because automation doesn't work all the time. It just makes certain things easy and complicates other things.
Are you an expert in that?
What
field? That to help people make their time, to create time to do the.
I don't think I'm an expert in time management.
In the social media side.
Social media is my my background is restaurant marketing. So I worked in hospitality for 10 years. And then I worked in the luxury sector for 5 years before that. But throughout the last 10 years, social has been the thing that I've enjoyed the most, because I see the best results and I know that I can teach people how to do it properly. Okay. So what drives me doesn't always drive my customer. And that's the discrepancy. Because
what drives you though?
Teaching people how to be better at something, because I know they can be.
And better at social media.
Better at social media, because social media is not social media. But social media is online reputation, how people perceive you virtually. It's much bigger than just social media.
Their status.
Yeah, and I'm also very, as I said before, I'm quite torn, because I'm very passionate about the ocean, hence the name. It's funny, Blue Ocean Strategy, Blue Mind.
And my last company that failed was called Ocean Red. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay, well there you go.
Well, do you know that the book that inspired me to set this up, Blue Mind, is written by a marine biologist, and he talks about red mind, which is stress, blue mind, which is calm.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I had in my thing.
Yeah, grey mind.
And I have daily mind, which is related to all of that. And I have another in mind as well, which is because I'm marketing in my background. So I have another one that is cool marketing and is related to mine and blue thing.
There's definitely something in the blue, right?
Definitely something in the blue. I'm really sorry. I'm back. Hello.
We're having a great time, Anthony.
Yeah, no, I was thinking you seem quite happy without me. I'm quite tempted just to leave you to get on with it now.
Oh, I think we need to meet up for coffee.
Well, no, I was, as a serious point, I did think about whether we should have a session where there's just a lot more chat in amongst the group, because you've got so much to talk to each other about, and you know, me kind of giving you 2 minutes at the beginning to, you know, keep conscious of the time. Whereas ordinarily, when we've been doing this live, there's so much more chat time, and I'm not quite sure how to. I haven't really, you know, nailed how we can work this out. But would you like to do that? Would that be useful?
Yeah, I think Anthony, we were just saying, you know, the frustration with video is that it doesn't stream well on Zoom. And actually the value for us is talking to each other in response to the slides that you're sharing. So maybe for future reference, video can just be put in the chat as a link and we can look at it on our own. Because this is actually really, really great. Just be able to ask each other questions and learn from each other.
Okay. Well, look, there are two options that we could do now. One, you can try and develop your own value status map, kind of like this. Sorry, the strategy curve thing. Or you can keep on chatting, and you can go and do that in your own time. But you can't do it on mute.
What about the slides that you sent us? Are we supposed to look at those?
Well, that's what I was going to get onto now. So why not, I tell you what, why don't I just talk through that process, and then let's not do that now. But you can go away and spend the week thinking about that if you'd like to. And then we can just do some more chatting. So I'll rattle through that fairly quickly, because essentially these are just the tools to enable you to get to this position. So let's come in. So the next thing is, okay, how do you create that sort of that graph map? So step one is, in terms of the things that I sent over, then there was a, hold on, let me just get that up. Okay, so there was the strategy canvas template. So that's the first one. If you're there and you fancy opening that up. Oh, it's not opening mine for some reason. But you've got, there are two parts to this. One is a list of 10 things. So there are 10 key criteria of the sector, and just sort of trying to map those things out, and then giving them a, sorry, let me just see if I can scroll down. Okay, so we'll look at something like this on one of the sheets. So essentially, you write down 10 of the key competing factors, list the key factors in the industry, and then give it a score on 1 to 5. So this is kind of like the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in terms of where it's going to sit. So you can start to create this overall, sorry, I'm not sharing the screen. Let me share the screen again. So you can start to create this whole thing over here on the left-hand side. And so by filling this in and putting in the scores, so this is your score, and then this is the score of the competition. So just start to think about what is it that you think are the kind of overwhelming factors which are important in the sector. And then this will then map on the second sheet. We'll start to map out, and that will create the look for you automatically just by putting those scores in. And then the, okay. So then the other thing is about trying to reach into that uncontested market space. You know, with the example of the Casella wines, it was all the people who didn't drink wine but liked alcohol. With Cirque du Soleil, it was all the people who liked the spectacle but wouldn't go and get their shoes dirty in the circus. So it's about trying to understand who they are. So there's a thing here, there are 3 tiers of non-customers. So in the central part, you've got the current market, kind of who the kind of core customers are. Then you've got the tier 1, which are the customers who might become customers. And then the people who refuse not to engage in the market. And then the unexplored, the customers who are kind of in distant markets who never really thought about being engaged by yours. So a couple of examples here. So let's just look at the orchestra industry. So the first tier of non-customers are individuals who attend concerts every once in a blue moon, but it's seen as more that something they ought to do rather than they do. It's not for them. They don't find it particularly enjoyable, but they just feel that, you know, it appeals to their cultural snobbery in some shape or form. Then there's the second group, who are individuals who can afford to attend but choose not to because they just find it boring, or it's outdated, or it's just a bit too much for them. And individuals who never really consider going to the orchestra as they have no knowledge of classical music and they don't feel it's something that they own. But I think what you can see just kind of within that is if you then apply that into the example from Cirque du Soleil, then, you know, by the same way, people didn't attend because they found the experience, well, in the circus, just a bit too tawdry for them. And other people who just never really thought about going in the first place. And I think in this third thing, that this whole idea is that they have no real knowledge of classical music, is something that was tapped into really well by Classic FM, the radio station, when they launched. And they just focused on the bits that people recognized. So it was really popular arias from opera. It was all the things which have been used in every bit of classical music that had ever been used in TV advertising. So you knew, you know, you didn't know what the name of it was, but it would be called, oh, that's the Hovis advert, or that's the Hamlet advert, or that's the Woolly Sheep advert, you know, things like that. Or that's the music from the movie and from the film. So they completely democratized and popularized what was seen as quite a stuffy thing. So just trying to understand those customers and using that, I'll send all these slides to you, by the way, so you can see them for yourselves. But just seeing all of that, you know, trying to demarcate who are the people on the fringes of your market, who are the people who, rather than going in and competing with everyone else, you might find as you know, I think what Cecile was saying last time was just rethinking a little bit in terms of what the proposition might be in the context of who that audience could be. And if you can then stretch out to engage a wider audience, that could be an interesting place to be. So those are kind of like, I guess, kind of like 2 starting points, really. It kind of then gets a little bit more involved. But I think as a next step, I would say if you could try and map that out and think about who those customer segments would be, that's a really good starting point and a good kind of takeaway from this. Okay. Does that make sense? Does that give you something to do?
Yes.
Okay, so,
Yes,
so that's your homework. We've got 5 minutes left, and we can stretch that for a bit longer if you don't have to rush away. I'm fine to do that. And I'll stop interrupting your much more productive conversation.
I just want to, can I just say something? Because
Yeah.
this seems to flip on its head all the traditional business and the marketing thing, where it's like your product and then you go like this and then you sort of feed to your market. This is now trying to see where the people are and then trying to find something to fit into them.
Well, it's not about some, well, I suppose it is. I mean, to fit into them sounds like you're trying to like push people into it, but it's kind of slightly more proactive than that, I think, in terms of trying to, it's again, coming back to that value proposition canvas. What are the things which are being underserved at the moment? What elements of your customers' experience, or not necessarily your customers, but of people's experience, is being badly served by the accepted norms of a business? Now, it may be that this is a very particular approach, and it may be that this isn't 100% relevant for what you're doing. But I think it's interesting to kind of think through it a little bit, just in terms of giving another sense of perspective over and above what we talked about around the value proposition canvas, because it just starts to think about things in a slightly different way, not just about your product, but just more about the opportunity, the market opportunity, and about how you might be able to extend what you're doing. Because I think probably a lot of products get created because you think, oh look, there's a thing that needs changing, or there's something that needs improving, and that's what you latch onto. And the more you can understand the context within which that sits, then the more that has the opportunity that you are not your product, you are creating a business. And so the product is just, this is just the first step that you've got in terms of trying to work out how can your business succeed. Because if you create a product, it's very hard to make that succeed. If you create a business which operates a product, then that means you can, that can have some success, and it enables you to go into the next step. But if this is just it, if what you're doing now is going to be the be all and end all, then it's fine, it could work, and it may be that that's what you want. But if you want to create that business, understanding the context of the business and how you can fit into that and how you can exploit and own that particular sphere will stand you in good stead.
Yeah, because it just doesn't, it's different from dovetailing with your customer segments. But I guess it's opening it up onto seeing it in the wider picture, and seeing, I think this works on your product, more on your product, so that you can be manipulating your product that will serve the needs of all those other people.
I think the important thing is that you don't come in and introduce a product which is, it may look different, but it's essentially doing the same thing. And if you're so kind of back with the kind of the happy bunny example, that if you're creating something which is new, but it's only new at the same level of everything else which is going on, you're not really introducing innovation, you're just creating a new brand. And that's going to have, that can get some traction, but it may be less successful than trying to really understand the market issue, because then that gives you a bit more opportunity to meet that unmet requirement which exists at the moment. And the thing is, like I said before, I think you're all one step ahead in this, because you are, you're unencumbered by anything else that you've got going on in your existing businesses. So you have a lot more flexibility. All this is trying to do is just to be able to give a bit more context and possibly prompt some thinking of going, oh yeah, well hold on, if I did that as well, that would improve the whole process a little bit further.
Yeah. May I say how valuable today has been for me to receive whatever you're going to send us, the slides to look at again, because in the area that I want to approach, there are all sorts of hidden agendas and resistances which have been in some of the established marketplaces like wine, like Airbnb, like the circuses, and I want to think my way around those to reach that, if you like, desert island of innovation where you haven't got the sharks biting at your heels all the time. I want to think through how to go through those and how to avoid those. Because I do have experience of many times of trying to introduce innovations and seen all sorts of resistance to it.
Yeah, that's hard.
People, well, the biggest example I saw with my own eyes was a wonderful new innovation in health that I tried to introduce the company to key decision makers in our health region, and the people with the decision-making capability and the budgets just made it terribly overcomplicated. Can you do this, and can you do that? Can you add this, and can you add that? And it all became far too expensive and too complex in the end. And they managed to bury it in that way, to try and reach that desert island of simplicity where, you know, the sharks won't be able to obstruct the idea.
Yeah, but Judith, you've got the NHS. You've got that whole bulwark monolith of staid and static. It only works like this, and there's no provision whatsoever for any flexibility. And if you don't buy into that, you don't even exist.
Right. I agree with you to a certain extent, Cecile, but I do know that mindset is changing, will change, and must change. If you like, coming out the other end of the pandemic, which has influenced huge change that would not have happened in the normal way. The pandemic has really speeded up so many industries and politicians and all sorts of things that would never have happened if the pandemic hadn't hit the whole world. So while you are right, and I agree with you on that, I do think that will change, but it won't change fast enough for me, which is why I'm looking at introducing something different. So thank you.
Mariella, you had your hand up a minute ago.
Yes, I'm saying that this brings value to me, because when I take out the value element, I am in the market. So why the people get into my website, but they don't buy to me and they buy to Amazon? So that's when I need to find these small details which I can make difference. And I just have like 5-10 seconds. So I really need to review again and again this value element, because I know these products they sell, they bought it, they have it, but they don't buy it to me. So I find that I need to do it again and again until I found the value element that I need to give to my customers, so I can catch that and they gonna make the shopping.
Yeah.
So for me, it's very interesting, this.
Can I ask a question? Because I'm you know, it's not an area that I know a huge amount about, but in terms of if you've got people coming in to the website and then going off to Amazon, can you not become an Amazon affiliate and then at least get a percentage of the sale if that's what they want to do?
Do you know about it? Because I'm still in the phase that I'm still like filtering my products. So I was not feeling confident to go to Amazon and still sell in eBay, Amazon, Etsy, which is another marketplace, because I'm still giving form to the idea. So I didn't want to go wide until I didn't filter my own idea. I'm willing to. If you have some experience or you know someone, I will be happy to extend. I know more or less how it works, but I don't have the technical knowledge.
Okay, no, I haven't done it, but I can ask around and see if I can find someone.
Yeah.
Okay.
There'll be lots of information on the internet. There's a lot of people who are so kind to give their time and their knowledge to educate you on technology. Yeah.
I don't know if it's blocking mine, but I feel that my idea still is not complete, so that I feel afraid to go bigger until I didn't prepare this, you know, speech, all the pages and all the operation behind, but that's the next step very soon.
I don't think you need to be an Amazon reseller these days. I've noticed recently there seems to have been a kind of upsurge in finding products that you want to purchase, and then they link through to Amazon. So you get the information on the site that you're looking for about the product that you've researched. And I think I'm actually on that site to make a purchase, but then when I go to make a purchase, I'm actually pushed through to a site like Amazon. So I think you earn the affiliate sales from doing that. So if people are finding your site and they're finding your content useful, then I think there is probably a way that without having to be a reseller on Amazon, you could just actually still earn money from that. But I don't know how it actually works.
I think the only thing I'm doing good is the SEO. So the people find me by Google, they come in. This is the only thing. The social media, I'm rubbish and a lot of things, but the SEO, I'm doing good. So they find me by Google, and I can and they go to my website, they see the website, and they go on. I still have sales, but I have another 15 people that come in and they didn't buy. So I need to get better on that, but I understand why the people buy in Amazon, because I do the same. but
Can I make,
I need to offer better price. Yes, sorry.
can I make or just put a thought out there? I've given you, or put a little private message to you, but one of the things that I think is really going to be engaging going forward is building communities of people. Because if you've got a community of people who buy into your idea, your concept, your vision, they will buy from you, whether it's through Amazon or through your website. And if you think about Mumsnet was about having a community of mums who had similar things that they're going through. So if you can create a community of people who have similar needs and frustrations, and you become the hub of that community, who have those ideas or those frustrations and needs, they will buy from you because you are the head of that community in a way, or you're the authority within that community. So it's kind of creating people who buy from you no matter what the products are like, because you might not have the best quality, you probably do, but it's about buying from you rather than just the products themselves. So it's just have a think. And yeah,
you don't want to lower your prices. You want to increase the value of your customers. They want to come to you because you're offering something that they're not getting from Amazon. The feedback, or join the community, or share your thoughts, or play the games together with somebody else or something.
Yeah, interesting. I think we should do just one in the future, maybe just of communities, and see how we can do, like brainstorming, to see how we can do that. I would like. Thank you.
Actually, just thinking, Mariella, I was reading a report this week on the social media trends for 2021, and you mentioned playing games. And I think because you're focusing on children, games is a great way to learn. It's stories, right? But practical. And in this report, they said that gaming is the fastest growing channel for, even though it's not a social media channel per se, it's an area of extremely quick growth, and it gets take up very quick. So if you could think about perhaps a way to introduce games into your offering, that could be a really interesting way to attract new customers, because then you could capture, the parents, because they're looking at what value it brings to their children, if that's the way you're going. It's just a thought, but I'm going to leave that with you, because I think that that's something that is completely underused. And the reason it's not used very much in socials is because people just don't have the technical ability. So maybe teaming up with a gaming expert could actually give you the edge.
I love it.
Sorry, carry on.
A lot of resources I have is interactive and game, family game, because I believe in what you are saying, and it's engaging resources. So this is more or less the line I'm looking for. But I think I'm getting to a point that I'm wishing to have someone to rely on. I'm scared to have some partner, because it's nice to take the decisions alone. But I remember last or the other week, they mentioned it, that instead to grow up, you need to partner, because you cannot cover everything. So I think that could be something I could look for.
Or even potentially getting a grant. I'm not plugging you the Silicon South grant.
Yeah, no.
Necessarily, because then you could pay somebody to give you that support before you jump into a partnership.
I even did a webinar, and one of the things that come from that webinar, they told me, but can you have something online, because our kids are on the iPad. So if you can have this concept in something online, we can buy it from you and still buy from you, but we can we see it working. I was like, oh yes, I could create an app. And all of this coming up.
Yeah, we could all create an app if we had £60,000 in our pockets.
It's knowing what people are going to buy, and it doesn't have to be overcomplicated. You're absolutely right, Cecile. Apps are really expensive and they can take ages. If you just had somebody like a motion graphic designer who comes up with moving concepts, You know, it could be very simple, but it just, and I know 2 of them that are local. So if you just wanted to talk to them and say, I'm thinking about this, but I don't know how much
I
that would,
will.
but I just love the idea of,
Yeah, I mean,
games and stories, bang. And then we can help you
wow,
push it out on social media.
Well, there you go. We're just all joined together.
That's
look,
well,
money
like,
coming, I'm gonna contract someone to do it. That's for sure.
That's
I just,
So yes, sounds.
yeah, I just like to say, I think there's got to be, you know, it just sounds like it could be really big, because there's so many parents concerned about what, I mean, including myself, how social media is kind of taking over all our lives, and looking at our kids and kind of almost losing our human connection with them, even though we're in the same room. So finding a way in to sort of start doing what used to happen before we all had smartphones, sounds like it could, you know, if you can find a way in, find the right way in, that could be amazing, you know. Yeah.
Just got an idea, John, if I may.
Yeah.
I've just kind of seen, because of your whole community logistics, something that's completely radical. Something like the old milk carts, the electric milk carts.
Yeah.
So you have like the electric moving delivery things that take around, which has some kind of unique character that's different from everything else, that everybody's waiting for the train or the truck or the fancy choo-choo or something to come and deliver the stuff from things. And I just thought that would be some kind of fun element that's unique, that's not using, that's using electricity, that's introducing that so we see it on a daily basis, and sustainable. Just an idea that popped into my head.
Yeah.
I will add, John, that could be very appealing to parents, because imagine with my child waiting the train, that's gonna be like a thing.
Yeah, and I've when I've travelled abroad in places like Southeast Asia, they still have traders going around with sort of these big trucks full of fresh produce, and they sort of have a chant. They actually, I think that most of them have like a speaker now, but they sort of, it's like market traders have their call.
Yeah.
And you
Here's the veggie truck. Here comes the veggie truck.
Yeah, and a lot of and they all, and they come and everyone goes down there and they get their daily supply of.
Well, it worked. I mean, the ice cream van. Yeah. The ice cream van has worked. So it's taken the idea of an ice cream van, coming, bringing something that's unique, that stands out alone, and then now it's not ice cream. You come and get your veggies, which you've just picked up from the, down Dorset, from the farmers in Dorset.
Yeah.
And here you bring in here. Yeah.
Oh yeah. That, I hadn't thought of that particular angle, but yeah, it's trying to tap into that excitement, for kids when the ice cream van comes around would be amazing. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Cool. Right. So, do you want to carry on? Should we call it?
I'm going to have to dash.
Okay.
Yeah.